My name is Michael, and for most of my life I believed that routine was the key to stability. I've always been a practical man, a lover of small certainties in an unpredictable world. Living in Los Angeles has taught me that beneath the dazzling veneer of the sprawling city lies an undercurrent of secrets waiting to surface. I never imagined that the meticulously crafted life I shared with my wife, Jenny, would soon begin to unravel. It was a cool spring evening in Los Angeles, a night that carried the gentle caress of an ocean breeze and hints of distant tides. I was driving home along Sunset Boulevard after a long day at the office. The city, with its endless neon glow and promise of reinvention, never ceased to amaze me. Yet, on that evening, amid the familiar hum of traffic and the soft murmur of the city, something felt subtly off, though nothing overtly alarming had occurred. I glanced at my phone as I merged onto a quieter street in our upscale West Hollywood neighborhood. A routine reminder flashed on the screen, a meeting scheduled for the next day. This was the kind of mundane detail I'd come to expect in my orderly life. Jenny, my wife of nearly 10 years, had built our small, comfortable world here amidst LA's ever-changing landscape. We prided ourselves on our shared dreams and the stability of our life, even as the city around us pulsed with unpredictability. Our house was a modest mid-century home tucked away in a quiet cul-de-sac, a testament to the balance we sought between the glamour of Los Angeles and the comfort of a private retreat. I still recalled the day I met Jenny at a film festival in downtown LA during our college years. Her creative spark and warm smile had immediately drawn me in, and over time, our lives merged into one, built on trust, laughter, and a shared vision for the future. That evening, as I pulled into our driveway with the iconic LA skyline shimmering in the distance, I felt the familiar buzz of the neighborhood, distant conversations, the occasional siren, and the constant hum of traffic. I stepped out of the car and savored the warm night air as I made my way to the front door. The soft glow of the porch light, coupled with the faint strains of music from the living room, reassured me that everything was as it should be. Inside, our home was a blend of minimalist design and personal touches. The subtle scent of jasmine, Jenny's favorite, mingled with the delicate hints of memories captured in framed photos of our adventures, lazy days at Santa Monica Beach, midnight strolls along the Venice boardwalk, and sunlit afternoons spent in quaint Los Angeles cafes. Everything appeared perfectly in place. Yet, as I passed by our study, a slight anomaly caught my eye. The door was ajar in a way I hadn't noticed before. While Jenny often left doors open, tonight, the spill of light into the corridor carried an unspoken message. I pushed the study door open and noted a few subtle details. Her laptop was still open to a half-finished draft, a mug bore a faint lipstick stain, and her favorite cardigan was casually draped over the back of her chair. I dismissed these small irregularities as mere traces of a busy day in a city that never truly stops moving. I closed the door gently behind me, trying to reassure myself that nothing was amiss. Dinner was already in progress, a meal Jenny had prepared with care using a recipe she'd discovered at one of Los Angeles's trendy organic cafes. The aroma of roasted chicken intermingled with hints of basil and garlic, evoking memories of lazy Sunday afternoons spent by the pool. I set the table with deliberate calm, attempting to mask the subtle tension I felt since arriving home. Over dinner, our conversation meandered through everyday topics, updates from work, a new art installation in downtown LA, and even a brief mention of a TikTok video that was rapidly gaining attention across the city. At that moment, it seemed like nothing more than a casual remark, yet fate had a different plan. After dinner, Jenny excused herself early, citing the need to finalize details for a special project. I watched her walk away, a mix of admiration and an inexplicable hint of uncertainty stirring within me, feelings I quickly brushed off as the fatigue of the day. Left to my own thoughts, I retreated to our den where the soft flicker of the television played an old LA noir film. The ambient sounds of the city, distant traffic, muted conversations from a nearby cafe offered a temporary distraction, allowing me to convince myself that our life was still intact. Over the next few days, however, subtle changes began to ripple through our home. Jenny's phone buzzed more frequently than usual, and she became increasingly guarded about her whereabouts. At work, I found myself distracted, repeatedly revisiting that quiet evening, the slightly ajar study door, the remnants of her hurried presence, and an unsettling feeling began to take root. I took long drives along Mulholland Drive, gazing at the sweeping views of Los Angeles's glittering cityscape in search of answers to the mounting questions in my mind. But every mile I covered only deepened the mystery. The laughter that once filled our home grew fainter, replaced by prolonged silences that echoed in the corners of my thoughts. Friends remarked on how I seemed to be drifting, caught between the alluring facade of LA and the creeping reality of a life that was slowly coming undone. Then, one day, a collaborative TikTok video posted by a popular local influencer exploded across social media. The video, featuring unmistakable hints of intimacy and shared moments, carried details that struck a painful chord. As I scrolled through the viral post, pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even known were missing began to align. In that moment, I recognized subtle gestures and a familiar warmth in Jenny's expressions, details I had once associated only with our private, loving moments. Up until that shocking revelation, I had clung to the belief that our life in Los Angeles, with all its glitz and glamour, was secure. I was a man of routine, a believer in the stability we had built even when minor irregularities whispered of hidden truths. Now, as the days unfolded with increasing tension, I started to notice small discrepancies, a missed call here, a hastily deleted message there, each a silent testament to the unraveling fabric of our relationship. Every evening, as I navigated the neon-lit avenues and returned to our sanctuary, I desperately hoped that these anomalies were temporary lapses, mere aberrations in an otherwise perfect life. Los Angeles, after all, is a city of second chances and reinvention. I wanted to believe that our marriage, built on years of shared memories, could withstand this quiet storm of betrayal. Yet, beneath the comforting routines and the shimmering lights of a city that promised endless beginnings, a slow, methodical erosion was taking place, a betrayal that was neither dramatic nor explosive but insidiously real. I had built my life on certainty, and now the digital world, represented by a seemingly innocent TikTok post, had thrown everything into disarray. I stand at the crossroads of routine and revelation, a man forced to confront the possibility that the life I so carefully constructed might be nothing more than an illusion. The quiet before the storm was ending, and soon the full force of the truth would demand my attention, altering everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the fragile balance of our shared existence. The viral TikTok post had been the spark that ignited a slow-burning investigation I never intended to launch. In the days following that shocking video, I found myself scrutinizing every corner of our life in Los Angeles for evidence of a truth I wished wasn't there. I knew I couldn't allow my emotions to get the best of me. There was work to be done if I was to uncover what lay hidden beneath the surface. It began with a quiet unease. The TikTok had been a joint venture between Jenny and a local influencer whose username flashed across the screen with every tap of my finger. The video was slickly edited, a polished production that showcased moments of intimacy, playful smiles, and unmistakable chemistry between Jenny and this man. A TikToker whose presence was as bold as it was incongruent with the steady life we had built. I watched it over and over again, not out of desperation but with a quiet determination to understand what I was seeing. In the early light of morning, before the city had fully woken, I started digging. I combed through Jenny's social media history, searching for clues hidden in her posts and tagged locations. Our Los Angeles lifestyle had always been public enough, a well-documented series of coffee shop snaps, sunlit beach photos, and curated images of our shared travels around the city. But now each picture and comment took on a new meaning, a hint that there might be more to Jenny's interactions than met the eye. I made a discreet visit to a few of the spots we'd frequented. At a popular cafe on Melrose Avenue, I sat at a corner table and observed the ebb and flow of patrons. There was an energy here that seemed to vibrate with the rhythm of LA, an intensity that made even the most ordinary day feel charged with possibility. I scanned the room, half expecting to catch sight of the TikToker, a man whose presence was now all too significant. I didn't see him, but I did overhear whispers about a rising local social media star, someone who was steadily gaining traction with his candid and unfiltered content. A visit to that cafe later yielded no concrete evidence, just the ambience of the city, unchanged yet subtly different in my eyes. Next, I turned to a digital search. I spent evenings researching the TikToker's profile, piecing together a timeline of posts, comments, and collaborations. It became evident that his digital persona was meticulously crafted to attract attention. Glamorous settings, carefully choreographed dance routines, and an aura of unspoken allure. Jenny's involvement in one of his videos was no mistake. It was deliberate, and it raised questions I had long suppressed. I wasn't looking for emotional justification. My focus was purely on the facts. Every like, every shared comment, every location tag was a data point that I recorded with meticulous care. Despite my growing list of observations, I made sure to maintain the facade of normalcy at home. I continued my routines, worked my regular hours, and played the part of the untroubled husband. At family gatherings and office meetings, My calm demeanor concealed the quiet scrutiny I applied to every conversation, every gesture Jenny made. I became a man of routine by day and a relentless investigator by night. A stark contrast that the busy streets of Los Angeles seemed to accommodate effortlessly. The physical evidence was sparse. There were no overt messages on her phone, no glaring digital footprints that screamed betrayal. The TikTok post itself was the primary clue. A moment of shared intimacy captured and broadcast for the world to see. In that public space, however, the roles of performer and partner blurred into one ambiguous narrative. Was it just another marketing tactic, a harmless dalliance staged for online applause? Or was it a genuine connection, a betrayal that undermined the foundation of our shared life? I revisited our home with a newfound awareness. The neatly arranged living room, the familiar scent of jasmine, and the subtle personal touches now felt like carefully constructed sets in a play. I began to notice how Jenny's routine had shifted in small ways. The extra minutes she took to fix her hair before leaving for work, the way she hesitated before picking up her phone in my presence, and the late nights when she would leave the house under the pretext of meeting a friend or working late on a project. Each of these was a crack in the illusion of our perfect life. A series of moments that, taken together, painted a picture of someone living a double life. Determined to separate fact from assumption, I decided to follow a hunch. One afternoon, after Jenny had left for an early meeting, I took a drive along the 405 freeway, a familiar route that now seemed to stretch into an endless network of possibilities. I recalled that the TikToker's profile mentioned several Los Angeles hotspots, including a trendy rooftop bar in downtown LA. I parked discreetly near the location and observed the scene from a distance. I watched as patrons mingled under the neon glow, their conversations a mix of laughter and hushed tones. It wasn't long before I noticed a figure who matched the profile I had seen online. A man who carried himself with the effortless confidence of someone accustomed to being in the spotlight. I couldn't see Jenny, but the encounter was enough to set my heart racing with a quiet, resolute urgency. I didn't confront anyone that day. I was gathering pieces of a puzzle that was slowly coming into focus. The night eventually swallowed the evidence as the city's vibrant chaos took over. But the image of that man lingered in my mind like a watermark on a photograph, persistent and undeniable. Back at home, I revisited every digital trace, every interaction that could explain the TikTok video. I wasn't interested in a deep dive into emotions or hidden psychological motives. My investigation was strictly practical. I noted the timestamps, the geographic coordinates of various posts, and any overlap between Jenny's known activities and the TikToker's rising profile. The evidence was circumstantial, but in Los Angeles, where every street corner and neon sign held a story, the clues began to align. As the days passed, the tension at home grew. Jenny's responses became brief, her eyes occasionally flicking away when I mentioned the video in passing. It wasn't a confrontation, just a quiet acknowledgement that something had shifted. I avoided raising suspicions publicly, aware that Los Angeles was a city where appearances often masked deeper truths. Instead, I continued to piece together the puzzle, carefully, methodically, and without the need for dramatic confrontation. The vibrant, bustling life of Los Angeles carried on around me, but within the walls of our home, the steady hum of routine was now punctuated by an undercurrent of hidden exchanges and uncertain glances. I had set out to uncover the truth behind the viral TikTok video and, in doing so, had opened a door to a reality that was far more complex than I had ever imagined. I didn't yet know where this path would lead, only that each day brought a new piece of the puzzle, each a crack in the illusion I once trusted. The investigation was no longer just about a social media post, it was about the unraveling of the life I thought I knew laid out against the backdrop of a city that thrived on reinvention and secrets. And so, I continued my careful watch, a man determined to see every detail, every moment of truth, no matter how subtle it might be. The roads of Los Angeles were wide and full of possibilities, and as I drove them day after day, I could only wonder which turn would finally lead me to the reality behind the facade. I had reached a point where facts and intuition converged, a crossroads where the evidence of that viral TikTok post and a series of subtle daily anomalies demanded that I act. It wasn't a matter of emotions or philosophical debates about fidelity, it was a practical need to understand what was happening in my life. Early one Saturday morning, while the city was still yawning awake and the palm trees cast long shadows in the low light, I decided to revisit the scene at the trendy rooftop bar in downtown Los Angeles. The bar was known as the Echelon, a place where young influencers, aspiring artists, and locals rubbed shoulders in an atmosphere defined by its understated glamour and panoramic views of the city. I parked a few blocks away and approached on foot, blending into the flow of early patrons who were enjoying quiet coffee or a pre-lunch cocktail. Inside the Echelon, the space was as modern as it was inviting. Glass walls offered uninterrupted views of the city skyline, and soft electronic music provided the perfect backdrop for relaxed conversation. I found a seat in a quieter corner and set my eyes on the entrance. I wasn't expecting any grand confrontation tonight, but I intended to gather more details. I recalled the TikToker's profile, his confident stride, and the unmistakable charisma that set him apart in the crowded social media scene. I watched as patrons mingled, scanning faces and outfits that might give away the identity of that elusive man. After an hour of careful observation, my attention was drawn to a group entering from the side door. One man, in particular, stood out. He carried himself with a kind of nonchalant assurance, his dark hair styled effortlessly, and he wore a designer jacket that suggested he was accustomed to being noticed. The moment he stepped into the light, I recognized the glint in his eyes, an intensity that had been present in the TikTok video. I watched him casually order a drink and then make his way to a table near the back. My pulse quickened, but I maintained my composure. I needed more than a passing glance to be sure. Before I left, I discreetly took a few notes on my phone, locations, descriptions, times, and even snapped a couple of quick pictures from a distance. Not to invade anyone's privacy, but to preserve details that could later corroborate my suspicions. I left the Echelon with a mix of determination and resolve, my mind set on verifying what I had seen. Back in my car, cruising slowly along the palm-lined streets of West Hollywood, I reviewed the images. The man's presence confirmed what I had hoped not to see. He was indeed the TikToker whose face had now become the focal point of my investigation. The clear connection between Jenny's involvement in the video and this stranger was emerging piece by piece. I made a mental note to check his social media feed more closely, but that was not the only task ahead. Upon returning home, I decided to look at our daily routine for further inconsistencies. I scoured through the past week's digital traces, Jenny's call logs, the timestamps on shared photos, and even her check-ins at local establishments. Each minor detail that might have once seemed like a normal part of our LA life now felt like a clue in a larger mosaic. I confirmed that on several evenings, her location tags pointed to places where I hadn't seen her before. A new gym near downtown LA, a boutique cafe in Silver Lake, all places that fit neatly into the lifestyle of someone exploring other avenues in the sprawling city. I couldn't shake the feeling that these were not just random outings. There was a pattern, a late departure from home, followed by her absence during times when we'd normally share our routine. In my pursuit of clarity, I began cross-referencing her movements with the TikToker's recent posts. It wasn't long before I found a photo of him at a Los Angeles studio, a studio that Jenny had visited on a day she claimed was spent on work-related errands. The evidence was slowly solidifying. Every digital footprint, every timestamp, was aligning with the growing suspicion that our shared life was more complex than I'd ever imagined. Later that evening, as dusk turned the sky into a canvas of deep blues and oranges, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and a pile of printed notes in front of me. The hum of the city outside, punctuated by the occasional honk and the distant murmur of nightlife, formed the backdrop to my methodical review of the day's discoveries. I wasn't looking for an emotional confrontation, this was about facts. The practical man in me, the one who had built a stable life here in Los Angeles, was now faced with a series of undeniable clues. I started making plans for my next move. I needed to follow up on the connection between Jenny and the TikToker, but I also needed to be cautious. The city was vast, and information could be as fleeting as the neon signs flickering along the boulevards. I resolved to keep my investigation methodical and deliberate. Rather than rushing into any form of confrontation, I planned to compile a comprehensive timeline of events, a record of every missed call, every unexplained outing, and every digital interaction that could point to the truth. Before calling it a night, I made one last check on the TikToker's social media. Scrolling through his feed, I saw more collaborations with local influencers, but there were also a few posts that hinted at more personal moments. One video, posted late at night, showed him laughing and sharing a quiet moment with a woman whose silhouette bore a striking resemblance to Jenny. The caption was vague, a mention of an unforgettable night, but it added another layer to the narrative. I saved the post and added it to my growing collection of evidence. The streetlights outside my window shone brightly as Los Angeles prepared for another night of relentless activity. In a city defined by its ever-changing landscape and the constant flow of news stories, I realized that my life had taken a turn that I never expected. The stable routine I had relied on was now fractured by a series of deliberate actions that I could no longer ignore. As the hours passed and the city's rhythm slowed to a quieter hum, I sat back and reviewed my notes one final time. I knew that tomorrow would bring more opportunities to observe, to gather data, and to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. The next phase of this investigation would be crucial, a careful stepping stone between the quiet accumulation of facts and the moment when I would need to face the reality of our situation. In Los Angeles, where every moment was amplified by the city's relentless energy, I understood that the truth was waiting just around the corner. It was hidden in the details, the places Jenny had visited, the subtle cues in her behavior, and the undeniable connection to that man in the TikTok video. I was determined to uncover it all, one deliberate step at a time. This wasn't a tale of wild emotions or dramatic breakdowns. It was a matter of life as it was lived in the sprawling, unpredictable city. The practical man in me had taken on a new role, the role of an investigator piecing together clues to reconstruct a life that I once thought was unassailable. And as I prepared for the next day, the crossroads of truth loomed larger than ever, promising that the coming moments would finally reveal what had long been concealed behind the dazzling facade of Los Angeles. It all came to a head on a humid Los Angeles night when every suppressed detail demanded resolution. I had spent weeks methodically gathering evidence, screenshots, timestamps, and observations from the city's pulse, and now it was time to confront the reality I had uncovered. I parked my car outside our home, its familiar exterior illuminated by the soft glow of streetlights and the distant hum of the city. The quiet of the night did nothing to mask the storm churning inside me. I knew that tonight, Jenny and I would finally face the truth head-on. Inside, the house felt different and charged, as though every room had been waiting for this moment. I set down my printed notes on the kitchen counter and took a deep breath. There was no room for dramatics or endless debates. This was about facts and the integrity of the life I'd built. I waited in the living room, every sound heightened, the tick of the clock, the murmur of the city through open windows, until Jenny finally appeared. She looked tired, her usual spark subdued by the weight of unspoken words. I motioned for her to sit down, keeping my tone even and measured. "Jenny," I began, "we need to talk. I've seen things, evidence that tells a story I never expected." Her eyes flickered with a mixture of apprehension and something I couldn't quite read, a silent acknowledgement that this conversation was inevitable. There was no outcry, no grand display of emotion. Instead, a heavy silence settled between us as I placed my phone on the coffee table and began to show her what I had discovered. The images, the social media posts, the location check-ins, it was all there. I recounted each piece in clear, unvarnished detail, the collaborative TikTok video, the evidence of her late nights, the photos of a man whose presence had become impossible to ignore. I spoke plainly without resorting to accusations steeped in bitterness. This was simply a presentation of facts. For a long moment, she said nothing. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant echoes of traffic from the street. Finally, she sighed, a long, slow exhalation that spoke of resignation rather than remorse. "Michael," she said quietly, "I never wanted it to come to this." Her voice was steady, but I could tell there was an undercurrent of regret that didn't match the detached tone of her words. I wasn't there for explanations wrapped in emotion. I needed clear answers. "So why?" I asked simply. Jenny's gaze dropped to her hands on the table. "It wasn't planned," she replied, each word measured. "It just happened. I met him, a TikToker with an appealing lifestyle and charisma that I found hard to ignore, and suddenly I was drawn into a world I thought was just a part of my work, a collaboration that quickly turned personal." Her voice held no grand apologies or dramatic declarations. It was plain, almost clinical. I listened, my mind focusing on every detail rather than being swept away by the rising tide of emotion. In our years together, we had built our life on shared routines and mutual respect. Now, that foundation was splintering under the weight of choices made in the neon haze of Los Angeles. I wasn't asking for a flood of psychological insights or lengthy justifications. I needed the truth, and I had it. "I built my life on certainty," I said. "I believed that our world, our routines, were enough. But you chose a different rhythm, a dangerous one that wasn't part of the plan we made together." I paused, letting the words settle between us. "I'm not here to condemn you. I just need to understand how we got here." Jenny's eyes shimmered in the low light, and for a brief moment I saw something like regret there. "I lost myself, Michael. The city, the constant reinvention, it made me feel like I was trapped in a routine that didn't let me be free. I wanted to feel alive again, even if just for a while. Her explanation was matter-of-fact, devoid of the introspective weight that might have overwhelmed the situation. For a moment, I simply absorbed her words, focusing on the reality we now faced. I had seen the evidence and I had heard her account. The practical part of me, the one that had always trusted in routine and stability, recognized that the life we'd built was now at a crossroads. There was no dramatic showdown here, only a measured confrontation of facts and choices. What do we do now? I asked, my voice low and steady. There was no time for endless debates or emotional pleas. This was about deciding the next step. The city outside continued its endless dance of lights and shadows, indifferent to the choices made within our walls. Jenny's response was equally practical. I don't expect forgiveness, Michael. I can't undo what's been done. But maybe we can figure out what's next, whether that means trying to rebuild trust or simply going our separate ways. Her words were not laden with guilt, but with an acceptance of reality. I stood silent for a long moment, weighing the options before me. In Los Angeles, where every night held the promise of reinvention, I was faced with a decision that would redefine my own path. I had always believed in routine and the security it provided, but sometimes life forced you to choose between the comfort of the known and the uncertain call of change. The night stretched on, and as we talked through the remaining hours, it became clear that there were no easy answers. The evidence was irrefutable, and yet the final decision was left to us, a choice between salvaging the fragments of what we once had or accepting that the path forward was separate. The conversation wasn't filled with dramatic accusations or tearful apologies. It was a simple exchange of truths, a practical discussion about a life that had been altered irreparably. In the end, I made a choice. I decided that while I could not ignore the betrayal, I could also not let it define me entirely. Los Angeles was a city of constant change, and I had to decide whether to fight for a remnant of our old life or to embrace a new beginning. With the evidence laid bare and the truth finally confronted, I chose to step away, not with anger, but with the resolve to rebuild on my own terms. The night ended with the quiet sound of our farewell. There were no dramatic gestures, no explosive declarations, just the simple, unadorned truth of two lives diverging in a city that never slept. I stepped out into the cool night air, leaving behind a home that had once represented stability, now a monument to choices made in the glare of neon lights. Driving away, the Los Angeles skyline looked the same as ever, a dazzling display of endless possibility. And in that moment, I realized that sometimes the end of one chapter was simply the beginning of another. The betrayal was real, and the truth was undeniable, but it did not define the entirety of who I was. I had learned that even in a city built on reinvention, there are moments when the past forces you to confront your future. As the miles passed beneath the wheels of my car, I focused on the road ahead, determined to rebuild my life piece by piece. The final reckoning had come, and with it, the choice to step forward into a new chapter. A chapter written on my own terms, away from the shadows of what had been. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this journey, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this one. Got thoughts or experiences you'd like to share? Drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.